We all have those sliding door moments in life. The ones where you make a split-second decision without thinking, only to realize years later that this single choice is the only reason you're still breathing. When you're 17, you possess a dangerous, intoxicating arrogance. You truly believe you are invincible. You think the tragedies you see on the evening news only happen to other people, in other towns. You never think the monster is going to pull over, roll down his window, and speak to you. But the truth is, the monster doesn't always hide in the dark woods, and he rarely looks like a movie villain. Sometimes he's just a guy in a car on a quiet night, and sometimes he's looking right at you. The year was 2003. This was an era before smartphones, before location sharing apps, and before you could ping a friend with a tap of your screen. If you were out of the house, you were completely off the grid. If you got into trouble, your only lifeline was a clunky brick phone in your pocket, assuming it was charged, and assuming you had a signal. I grew up in a tiny, postcard, perfect coastal town, the kind of place that completely shuts down after 8:00 p.m. We had one main street, a couple of mom and pop diners, and miles of rocky, unforgiving shoreline. By late August, it was basically a ghost town. Everybody knew everybody, and nobody locked their doors. It was the epitome of a safe haven, or at least that's the lie we all told ourselves. It was late August, and a thick, oppressive heat wave had settled over the coast. The kind of heat that makes the air feel heavy and suffocating, even in the dead of night. My bedroom was on the second floor, and without air conditioning, it felt like an absolute oven. By 2:00 a.m., I was wide awake, restless, and frustrated. I decided I needed some fresh air. Sneaking out wasn't rare for me, but usually it was to meet friends. Tonight, I just wanted to walk. I wanted to hear the ocean, feel the sea breeze, and clear my head. I threw on oversized sweatpants, laced up my Converse, grabbed my bulky silver Sony Discman, and slipped my headphones over my ears. I eased the front door open and stepped out into the night. The moment I stepped off my porch, the town felt entirely different. Shrouded in a thick layer of rolling coastal fog, it felt like an alien planet. The streetlights flickered, casting long, eerie shadows across the damp pavement. The smell of salt and decaying kelp hung heavy in the air. I hit play on my Discman, letting the heavy bass of early 2000s alt-rock drown out the absolute silence. I walked down the center of the empty road. For the first 20 minutes, it was pure bliss. No cars, no dogs barking, not a single light on in any of the houses. My route took me down a winding road hugging the coastline. On my left were rows of large, older colonial houses set back behind thick hedges. On my right, a steep drop, off down to the crashing waves of the Pacific. I was about a mile away from my house when I felt it. Before I even saw anything, I felt a low, rhythmic vibration beneath my feet. I paused, pulling the right headphone off my ear. Down the long stretch of road behind me, cutting through the dense, milky fog, were two glowing orbs, headlights. In a town this small, seeing a car at 20:30 in the morning was unusual. I stepped onto the narrow shoulder, kicking at the loose gravel to give the car room to pass. As it approached, I realized it was moving agonizingly slow. The engine had a deep, throaty rumble. When it rolled past me, I glanced up. It was a massive, dark-colored sedan, an older model, maybe a late 80s Crown Victoria. The windows were heavily tinted. I felt a tiny, instinctual prickle of unease at the base of my neck, but I forced myself to shake it off. Just a lost tourist, I told myself. I put my headphone back on and watched the car's red taillights shrink into the fog until they disappeared around a bend. The tension melted away. 5 minutes later, my CD track ended, leaving a few seconds of dead silence. In that brief window, I heard the crunch of gravel. I stopped dead in my tracks. I yanked both headphones down around my neck and slowly turned around. Coming up from behind me, crawling out of the fog at a walking pace, was the exact same dark sedan. My stomach plummeted. It had turned around. There were no side streets up ahead. The only way that car could be behind me again was if the driver had purposely pulled an illegal U-turn and come back specifically looking for me. A freezing wave of adrenaline washed over my body. The rational part of my teenage brain fought desperately against my survival instincts. Maybe they need directions. It's fine. I tested the waters. I started walking again, picking up my pace to a brisk walk. Behind me, the engine revved slightly. The car sped up, matching my exact pace. It stayed exactly 30 yards behind me, close enough that the headlights cast my elongated shadow far down the road. I slowed down to a dragging crawl. The car's brake lights flared red. It slowed with me. We were playing a terrifying game of cat and mouse. There were no streetlights on this stretch. To my left, the houses were completely dark. To my right, the unforgiving ocean. I didn't have a phone or a weapon, just a plastic CD player and my Converse. I kept my eyes locked straight ahead, praying the driver would speed off. He didn't. Suddenly, the engine roared. The tires bit into the asphalt with a sharp screech, and the massive sedan surged forward. Before I could react, it swerved sharply, crossing the opposite lane, and aggressively pulled onto the shoulder directly in front of me. It slammed on the brakes, angling itself to pin me between its heavy metal bumper and the thick hedges to my left. I froze. My entire body locked up in sheer terror. The engine rumbled, shaking the chassis, and then, with a heavy, metallic clunk, the driver's side door swung open. The interior dome light flickered on, casting a sickly, dim yellow glow. Through the open door, I got a clear look at the driver. He was a massive, heavy-set man, his stomach pressing tightly against the steering wheel. He wore a sweat-stained t-shirt. His face was round, his skin slick with sweat, but it was his eyes I will never forget. They were dead. They looked like shark eyes, flat, dark, devoid of any warmth or humanity. He wasn't frantic. He was staring at me with the calculated look of a predator evaluating trapped prey. The silence stretched on for what felt like a lifetime, broken only by the crashing waves and my deafening heartbeat. Then he spoke. His voice was gravelly and disturbingly calm. He didn't ask a question. He issued a command. "Hey," he grunted. "Come here." He gestured with one thick, meaty hand toward the cavernous, dark space of the open back seat. "Come here," he repeated. The spell broke. The sheer reality of the situation shattered my paralysis. If I took one step toward that open door, I was never going to be seen again. I didn't scream. I spun on my heel, and I ran. I abandoned the road and dove straight toward the dark houses. I vaulted over a low stone wall, scraping my knee, and crashed into someone's front yard. I sprinted across the dew-soaked grass. Behind me, I heard the heavy car door slam shut. The engine roared. He was reversing, tracking where I had gone. I desperately scanned the darkness. I was in the yard of the Hendersons, an elderly couple with a massive, overgrown property. I bolted toward the side of their house, tearing through thick rose bushes that snagged my clothes and scratched my arms. Adrenaline completely numbed the pain. Reaching the back of their house, I saw their raised wooden deck. I dropped to my hands and knees, scrambled through the damp dirt, and squeezed through a gap in the wooden lattice underneath. I crawled as far back into the darkness as I could, pressing against the cold concrete foundation. I curled into a tight ball, clamping both hands over my mouth, terrified my ragged breathing would give me away. Seconds later, headlights swept across the front lawn. The car had pulled up onto the grass. The heavy door slammed again. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Heavy, deliberate footsteps on the gravel driveway. From my hiding spot, peering through the diamond, shaped holes of the lattice. I saw the beam of a heavy-duty, mag-light flashlight cutting through the fog. It swept across the lawn and dragged across the rose bushes I had just destroyed. The footsteps were getting closer. He walked down the side of the house. He was standing no more than 15 feet away. I squeezed my eyes shut, trembling so violently my teeth chattered. I held my breath until my lungs burned. I could hear his breathing, heavy, labored, almost wheezing. The beam of the flashlight hit the wooden lattice inches away from my face. Blinding white light leaked through the gaps, illuminating the dirt around me. I silently begged, "Please don't see me." He stood there for what felt like an eternity, listening, searching, and then a sharp, frustrated sigh. The light clicked off. The footsteps turned around. Crunch. Crunch. They faded back to the front. I heard the door slam, the engine rev high, and the tires tear up the grass as the sedan sped away into the night. I didn't move. I lay in the damp dirt for 3 agonizing hours. Only when I heard a garbage truck grinding down the main road at dawn did I finally shimmy out from under the deck. Covered in mud and scratches, I ran home in the early light, snuck into bed, and sobbed into my pillow. I never told my parents. I convinced myself it was just a local creep. Fast forward to 2008. I was 22, living in a city apartment, attending college. It was a rainy Tuesday. I was eating takeout on my futon, the local news playing softly in the background. I wasn't paying attention until a phrase caught my ear, a major breakthrough in a string of cold cases. I glanced up. The news anchor looked grim. Behind him was a graphic featuring photos of 4 smiling young women, all around my age. Authorities have apprehended the man they believe is responsible for the disappearances and murders of at least 4 young women along the Pacific coast between 2001 and 2005. The graphic shifted. The photos disappeared, replaced by a police mugshot. My blood ran cold. The takeout container slipped from my hands. It was him. He looked a little older, but there was no mistaking it. It was the heavy, set man. He was staring into the police camera with those exact same dead, flat, shark-like eyes. The eyes that had evaluated me from the driver's seat of that sedan. The anchor continued. Police report the suspect targeted women walking alone late at night. His methodology was chillingly simple. He would trail his victims in his vehicle, pull over, and coerce them into his car before driving them to secluded areas. I sat completely paralyzed, the memories rushing back with violent force. The smell of the fog, the crunch of gravel, the blinding flashlight sweeping inches from my face. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by my window, staring down at the city streets, watching the cars drive by. It has been over 2 decades since that night in 2003, and I have never gone for a walk alone after dark again. Whenever I hear the deep rumble of an engine idling behind me, my heart skips a beat. We all have sliding door moments where you realize how thin the line between life and death really is. I survived because I ran and found a dark place to hide. But the thought that haunts me to this day, the thought that keeps me staring at the ceiling at 2:00 a.m., isn't about the chase in the dark, it's the open car door. I think about the vast black emptiness of that back seat, and I wonder, with a cold, sickening dread, if he hadn't spoken, if I had been just a little more naive, or a little more polite, how easily I would have stepped into that darkness and become just another smiling photograph on the evening news.